Welcome back. If you've ever been to a sporting event at any level, whether that be high school or the pros, there is a constant voice inside the building, played over the speakers, letting you know what's going on. That's the voice of the public address announcer, or as we in the business call it, the PA announcer. And there are some voices that are more memorable than others. I've been covering Detroit Pistons basketball for more than a decade now, and the Pistons really are blessed with one of the best PA announcers in the game. His name's John Mason. And he's the guy who came up with the iconic phrase, Detroit basketball. It's an unmistakable voice. I can't do it like him, obviously, but great passion and really invites the audience, the fans, to participate in his calls. And I met John for the first time back at the Palace of Auburn Hills several years ago. And just down the road from where the Palace once stood is another great PA announcer from Oakland University named Kevin Beers. And he sat down with SportsCaster.com's Giovanni Moceri. Giovanni, a recent graduate of Oakland U. He's done PA announcing and play-by-play at both the high school and collegiate level himself. Giovanni, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Johnny.
You got it, brother. All right, so give me a little of your background. What are some of the sports that you've been able to call in your career?
Yeah, so I got started at Oakland student radio station WXOU, and we would usually start the season. Like, we didn't have live sports until about a couple of years after COVID, but we got things started. We warmed up with some soccer and volleyball in the fall to prepare us for full-on basketball, every home game for men's and women's. And then into the spring, we'd get some baseball and softball. So whatever's in season, pretty much on WXOU, we were able to call. And, I've done a little bit of lacrosse. I've done some production for our club hockey games. So I was trying to get my hands on anything we could get at the radio station. And then afterwards, I got into some high school sports, public address announcing at Eisenhower, Shelby Township TV football. I've been lucky through Oakland to be able to meet a lot of great people, and they've given me some opportunities on the mic. So I've been pretty busy around the Macomb Shelby Township area.
No, that's great, man. And you have a good voice, and obviously that's part of it. But yeah, you got to put the time in and, go find it where you can get it. Kevin Beers is the voice of the Golden Grizz. You know him. What'd you guys talk about?
So I talked about how he got to Oakland. Now, to let you behind the curtain, it wasn't the first time I've interviewed Kevin before, but I got into how he ended up at Oakland, and it was actually a connection through Central Michigan where he met Oakland's associate head coach of men's basketball. So that connection brought him to Oakland over 20 years ago. This year would be his 21st season. A little bit of his background there, and I wanted to know what goes through his mind during a game. What's he trying to consider when his voice goes up and down, how he's listening to the crowd. I wanted to know the mechanics of how he does his job because he does it so well.
He does do it so well. And one of the things, I think a lot of us, when we're coming up through the ranks, it's like, hey, I got to have a calling card, or I need a catchphrase. And sometimes it can feel forced, if we're being honest, right? You're trying to force something in that may not fit. What is it that you think that has allowed Kevin to kind of, etch out his own place?
So for him, definitely his signature call of "that's traveling," and you can't do that. That became his calling card about 2 years into his time at Oakland. He tells me it was just random, on a whim, but that definitely, it stuck. And he listened to the crowd. He felt the buzz. And for him, he's just so attentive. He's listening so closely to the crowd that he knows what's working, what's not working. And all that energy is just natural. If he's away from the mic, it's the same energy. It's the same positivity. He's the same guy on and off the mic. So that definitely helps when it all comes through genuinely.
Yeah, no question. That's it, man. Be authentic, be genuine. And Kevin Beers does that. Here is Giovanni Moceri with longtime PA voice of the Oakland Golden Grizz, Kevin Beers.
Welcome in, everybody. My name is Giovanni Moceri, here for SportsCaster.com. Now, my guest today, if you're a fan of Oakland University, should sound very, very familiar. For the past 20 years, he has been the voice filling the arena with all kinds of energy at every home game. For the past 20 years as the public address announcer with a heart as big as his voice. He also works as a development associate at Oakland University's School of Education and Human Services. Kevin Beers joins me today. Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing great, Giovanni. I appreciate the offer to be here.
So, Kevin, I want to bring it to the beginning here. 20 years at Oakland University. How did you ultimately end up in the arena behind the microphone?
So almost a Wally Pipp story, kind of. If you're familiar with Wally Pipp, and I'm sure many people in your audience are. Um, Jeff Smith, he's the associate head coach for the men's team. This is his second tour of duty here at Oakland for Coach Campy. So the first time around, it would have been 2005, the fall of 2005. I got a call on my cell phone. It was Smitty, left a message, and he said, Beersy, I really want to get you involved with the program somehow. There's an opening for someone to host the games and contests that they do at timeouts and halftime and stuff like that. If you're at all interested, give Tracy a call. Was her name, and I left her number, and I ended that, and I thought. I'm not really that interested in it, but come on, my friend wants me to be part of the program. I'm gonna say yes. So I called Tracy, and she said, "Yeah, Coach Smith told me about you. Come on in Sunday. We have an exhibition game." So I went Sunday. We chatted, we talked, and she's at the tail end. She said, "By the way, every so often, once or twice a season, is it the PA announcer has to miss, either goes out of town or gets sick or whatever. Would you be at all comfortable with that?" And I said, Tracy, of course I would. I know my way around a mic. We'd talked about my radio background and stuff. And so she said, okay, great. See you Tuesday. I said, see you Tuesday. That was the first game. So I show up Tuesday, and poor Tracy, she had the look of death on her face when I walked in. I said, oh my God, what is wrong? And she said, the PA announcer is sick. He called, he's not going to be here. Is there any way? And I said, Tracy, we got this. What, do you got a script or something? And she said, yes, I have a script. Come on over. It's right by the microphone. Are you sure about this? I said, Tracy, we got this. Don't worry. So I did that game and had a blast doing it. And so the story that she told, she called me the next day and she said, I got a call from Coach Campy this morning. And he said, I don't know who that guy was, but I want him introducing our players. And so, she said, what are your thoughts? And I said, well, somebody has the job. And she said, you're not going to believe this. He just took a job with the Detroit Lions. He asked if there was a way we could back off his schedule. He'd love to do that. So, what we're proposing is if you'll do the men's games, he'll continue to do the women's games. He was doing both at the time. And I said, let me call my wife. And I called my wife and she said, yeah, go for it. So that's how it started. And I've been doing it for 20 years.
And from doing it for so long, you've done it in different venues, not just the arena, which is a little more within itself, let's say. It seats at about 4,000. But you've done games at the Palace of Auburn Hills, at Little Caesars Arena, both for Oakland games and for March Madness, for WNBA games. So when it comes to the different venues, how do you kind of adjust to the different setting? What's the difference between the arena versus the Palace versus LCA and the different venues?
Um, Technology really helps with that, G, because for whatever reason, the crowds don't scare me. I don't get nervous, as the number of people increase. Um, I think because I'm such a basketball fan and always has been, the only thing that gets me nervous is when there's more on the line. I just kind of naturally get a little bit more nervous. So like last year at LC, I was blessed to have done the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. Um, I'll admit I got a little bit nervous for that, and
I'd imagine.
yeah, if I can take a little slide back, the first time I really noticed myself get nervous was at the Palace, and it was the first time Oakland hosted the first and second round men's tournament. Okay, it was at the Palace, 2006. I did half the games, and the other guy that I was just talking about, he did half the games. So it was pretty cool. Um, and before my first game, the NCAA rep came over. He said, "Are you all set?" I said, "Yeah, I think so. I'm ready to go." And he says, "Well, that's great. Pretty cool that you are one of 8 people in the world that are about or that are going to do what you're about to do." And I went, "Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah." And I
No
got
pressure.
nervous. 8 people in the world, the guy said, so I got a little bit nervous because I was still pretty, that was my second year. So I didn't want to screw up. And that's the most nervous that I've been in 20 years doing it. It was because he used those words. So everything else after that has been, I have not been anywhere near that nervous. So back to your question, I apologize for the tangents.
All
But
good.
um, but technology does have something to do with it because the sound system at the Palace was incredible. I mean, I could talk softer than I do in the arena. I mean, in the arena, and our sound system in the arena is really good. I find myself though, because it's so intimate and it gets so loud in there, I find myself yelling into the microphone a lot. I didn't have to do that at the Palace. I don't have to do that at Little Caesars, even when it's, there are 20,000 people in the seats all roaring for Michigan State
Yeah,
instead of Oakland.
that's usually how it goes.
Yeah, right. So technology really does help with that, I think.
And then for you, because I've done just a little bit of public address, so I kind of get a sense of like what the cues are from the audience and kind of what they need, what's a good time. For you, like how do you know, especially like at Oakland specifically, how did you know what you were doing was working? And then that's kind of became your foundation. How did you kind of establish that familiarity with the crowd like that?
Honestly, it was just paying attention to contextual clues and reactions. And, as you can only hear, uh, about maybe 6 people behind you, and what their reactions are. So I put a lot on that 6, that I can hear. And when they say, "That's pretty cool," or "Did you hear him?" Or whatever, then I know I figure I've got something because I figured they're not alone. If they enjoyed it, likely they're pretty representative of the whole audience. And, so we just go with it. Other times, if it's really good, then I can hear laughter or cheering or chuckling or even a buzz. Like after the first time I said, "And you can't do that," there was a legitimate buzz in the audience. And one of the assistant athletic directors came running over and said, Beersy, you've got to keep doing that. Everybody's talking about it. Keep saying that." And so yeah, that one was pretty obvious.
I do want to keep talking about that, especially the "you can't do that." That's your calling card. It's and the chant afterwards
Yeah.
is just it spreads throughout college sports. Give us the origin story of "That's traveling" and "You can't do that."
Yeah, it's a good story. It really is. And we heard it, in fact, at the finals Monday night. Somebody, I can't remember which team it was, but one of the student sections chanted, "You can't do that," and it was.
I thought of you immediately when I heard
You
that.
heard it too. All right, very
Oh
good. Yeah,
yeah.
I didn't catch it. One of my sons said, "Dad, listen," and there they were. So the story, I think it was February. It was a February game in, now I can't remember if it was 2006 or 2007, but it goes that far back. I had started the season just looking for something cute and different and fun, and so I was saying, "That's traveling," when the opponent traveled, okay, and just stopping at that. And I thought, yeah, okay, I dig that. Everybody seems to kind of like that, and it sounds fun, and it's a little bit different and everything. So I kept doing that and then late in the season, Oakland had a home game, and I was the announcer, of course, and we were playing Valparaiso, which was our absolute gold standard nemesis of the day, and we hadn't beaten them in like 13 or 15 or 16 straight games. And we finally had a chance. I mean, we had a legit shot. Gee, it was late in the second half, and at a critical time in the game, with Oakland with a very slight lead at the time, a Valpo player got called for traveling. And so I went in, I pushed the mic, and I said, "That's traveling." And then out of nowhere, no pre-thought whatsoever. I'm not making this up. I couldn't have stopped it if I tried, but I couldn't try because I had no clue. I had no control over this whatsoever. My lips opened again and out came, "And you can't do that." And the crowd instantly buzzed, and I couldn't believe it. I thought, what on earth, where the heck did that come from? And the crowd was buzzing, and that's when that guy came running over, and he said, "Bearsy, Bearsy, you got to keep saying that." So that's the origin of it. So of course I kept doing it, and then I wanted to get the crowd into it too, the crowd to help say that. So I went to kind of a format that I just kind of created out of nothing. And I'll do the first one, and you can't do that. And you might have noticed this. If there's another one, especially not too far removed from the first one, I'll say that's traveling, but then I'll point to the crowd, and I want them to say, "And you can't do that." And so they then, got to be a part of it. So then fast forward to the next season, G, and the pep band at Oakland, they drive the show. I mean, they truly do. Everybody is awesome on the whole staff, and they do so much. The game day stuff is so good. That pep band, honest to God, they steer the whole deal. And so one of their guys decided, you know what, we're going to do a follow up chant to "That's traveling, and you can't do that." And so that's where the "you can't do that" that started. I had nothing to do with that other than, I mean, they wouldn't have come up with that probably had I not happened to, blurt out "and you can't do that." But that's the synergy. I mean, they totally came up with that. And the rest is history. It's literally iconic now. And you
It's one of
can't.
my favorite parts of going to Oakland games.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. And you can't go to a high school basketball game in this area without that chant being done by the student section and everything. It's really, really cool.
In one moment I wanted to zone in on, or rather a time period during COVID. Unfortunately, that arena was ruled to be empty for many of those home games, and he didn't have that kind of crowd interaction. How is it announcing to an empty arena, especially when there's that looming sense during COVID that everyone had? What was that experience like?
It was weird. That's a great question, G. I've not talked about this much, but it was weird is the first word that pops into mind because it was just weird, because the PA announcer, I mean, his or her job is to fire up the crowd in some way, right? And I mean, I think there's more to it than that, but that can be another show sometime. But so when they approached me, because I figured it was lost and I figured I was losing the season too, and so what? It was the student athletes that were, just paying for everything. It was just going to be an awful thing. So they approached me and said, "Kev, we want you to do your thing because we want to try to create as much normalcy, or at least close to any kind of normal situation for our student athletes as we possibly can. So we want you in front of that mic, and we want you doing your thing. Do all of it. Even though nobody's going to be chanting, 'You can't do that.' We want you to say, 'And you can't do that.' We want our student athletes to have at least as much as we control, as normal of an experience as we possibly can." And I really respected and admired that. And I was all too happy to do it. So it was weird, but that's what I kept in mind. I kept, so, and one of the things was I'd already been doing it for 15 years or whatever at that time. So it was okay. It's almost formulaic for me now. So it really wasn't a stretch for me to do it. With no crowd. It was weird, definitely, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
And then one final question, a kind of different twist as to the crowd's involvement in it. So we talked about when the crowds are 20,000. We talked about when they're in the arena, when it's empty. But what about when the game is not? It's just not going well, and you can tell the home crowd is disappointed. And I know you're a sports fan, and you feel it too. When it comes to those situations, do you feel the need to kind of compensate for it to get the audience's energy up? Or do you keep it the same and just let the game speak for itself? How do you play to a bummed out crowd?
So I try to keep it just the same, and inevitably, I mean, human beings are human beings, and they usually just kind of conform to whatever the atmosphere is most of the time, right? So I'm certain I'm not going to sit here and say I have never lost energy because of a blowout or whatever. I think it's impossible to say that. So I'm sure there is a slight drop. I'm very, very conscious of it. And I'll tell you what really motivates me. I'm trying to think a long, long, long time ago. I don't remember. It might have been Joe Dumars or Michael Jordan or somebody. I remember a basketball player saying, you know what? Somebody is coming to their first Pistons game or Bulls game or whatever it is. There are people in the seats tonight that are here for the first time ever. And, that player, which whoever it was, said, I take that very, very seriously. And I want to give them what they deserve because they've paid a lot of money to be here, for that game. And so that really stuck with me and really resonates to this day. And so I look at that too. So I picture that kid. There's always going to be a 6-year-old kid almost every game probably that is there for the first time or even the second time. And that kid deserves, and the Oakland program deserves for that kid to really have a good experience. And so if I can help with that, then I'm going to help with that.
Well, Kevin, that's all I got for you. Thank you so much for joining us. Keep rocking in the arena, man. We love what you're doing here whenever we go to an Oakland game. It's so much fun, and your energy is just, I'm buzzing when I'm walking out of the arena afterwards. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for rocking that microphone.
Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you. Talk to you soon.
Maintaining energy throughout a game, regardless of the time, score, momentum, and then allowing a catchphrase to come organically, not forcing it. All important takeaways from that. It's a great responsibility to be on the mic to serve the viewers or the listeners. And Kevin Beers does it well for Oakland University inside the arena. I want to thank all our guests today, to Giovanni Moceri and Kevin Beers from Oakland U for taking us through the art of public address announcing. Our thanks to Brendan Mato and the golf team at Detroit Catholic Central for really shaping the discussion of golf, sport, or skill. To Lyric Sloan and young George Latham, who proved that you're never too young to start chasing dreams, like becoming an author at the tender age of 10. And to Ethan Pavey and Ross Gauthier from Groves High School for laying out what the overall process looks like for modern-day high school athletes who are being recruited to play in college. If you want to hear more from any of our guests, be sure to follow Sportscaster on the various social media platforms. You'll find clips from this week's show and previous shows of Open Mic. SportsCaster.com, whole new platform for students, whether you're still in high school or in college or freshly out of college, to share your interviews and stories with us. Chance for the next generation of sports broadcasters to be heard over the airwaves here on WJR. If you want to be a part of it all, simply log on to SportsCaster.com. You can create your own profile and begin uploading your own creative content and perhaps be on our next show. And I'll leave you with this quote from author and public speaker Jim Rohn, who once said, if you really want to do something, you'll find a way. If you don't, you'll find an excuse. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you right back here at 8 o'clock on Open Mic, where we center our focus on the Detroit Lions and the options available in the upcoming NFL draft. That'll be next Wednesday. I'm Johnny Kane for SportsCaster.com. on WJR.